Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today, we're talking about a decision Wargaming made a little over 2 years ago that negatively affected quite a few ships in the game. And a couple of these ships are ships that are quite time-consuming or cash-consuming in order to get. And there's been no change or correction in this decision from Wargaming in the past 2.5 years. There's been a couple of things that have been quite insulting to players that acquire these ships. And those of you that have heard me talk about this topic before are probably looking at the background footage and going, "Really, Sealord? You're still stuck on this?" Yes, I am still stuck on this. Those of you newer viewers here are probably thinking, well, what's he stuck on? I am stuck on the fact that during the Commander rework, ships like the Siegfried were completely stripped of their ability to build into what at the time was one of the main selling points of the Siegfried, her secondaries. And now, 2.5 years later from this decision, we have received no changes or anything about the Siegfried, other than Wargaming saying that the Siegfried still has other parameters that help her perform quite well in game. And it's not just the Siegfried either. The other ship I usually like to bring up in this conversation is the Shikishima, the 20-inch Japanese battleship. Both of these ships were advertised to have good secondaries, and they did. Siegfried, if you look at her, she is armed with 6 15-inch main battery guns, but she also has those lovely German 128mm guns on her side. Now, back when the ship was released, this is pre-Commander rework. And those of you that haven't been around for that long, the Commander rework happened in Update 10.0. It was a time. Deadeye was a thing. Lighthouse builds were everywhere. And cruisers lost the ability to build into two things: survivability and secondaries. You could argue that the survivability changes were needed because of the amount of large quote-unquote cruisers that were coming to the game. I mean, nowadays I think just about every nation has a large quote-unquote cruiser, except for the British don't have one just yet. They got some pretty chunky boys, but they don't have any, like battleship caliber armed cruisers like most of the other lines do, to my knowledge, just off the top of my head. At least the major powers do, I believe. But anyway, and I mean, like ships like the Stalingrad, like we were talking about in yesterday's top 5 video, could build into their survivability, and they could just tank for days. The way it worked is that there was one set of skills for every single ship class in the game. We didn't have separate class skills like we do in today's World of Warships. So that meant ships like the Siegfried could build into her secondaries because she had a good amount of 128mm guns. Now, the Aegir, her sister ship that she was released alongside, she could build into her secondaries, but they weren't really that great because they had a longer base reload time and shorter range. The Siegfried, you could get her secondaries out to 11.5 kilometers, which on a tier 9 cruiser is quite good. So this meant that you had this set of 15-inch guns that, even without building into them, had decent accuracy. You had secondaries that could get out to 11.5 kilometers, which means that you had a pretty fearsome mid-range brawling cruiser here. Her armor is pretty decent, especially back in the day, so she had the HP, the armor, the secondaries, and the guns to be a mid-range brawler, to close-range brawler, and of course just she had torpedoes on top of that. And it was fun. Myself and others had a ton of fun getting in a triple Siegfried division and just slapping W, having this fast, more nimble cruiser than, of course, like the German battleships and such, and getting into mid and close range brawls in the ship. It was a good time. The secondaries also provided some DD repellent because you do only have 6 guns on the Siegfried, and they are 15-inch guns, so they have a longer reload time, so not exactly the best DD repellent, even if you loaded HE, but the 128s did a good job of keeping the DDs at bay when you were off by yourself. Now, like I said, with the Commander rework, the Siegfried was stripped of this ability to build into her secondaries, and you can't. And keep in mind, too, this is a Tier 9 Research Bureau ship. This is a ship that required players to regrind lines up to 6 times in order to get this ship. That's a bit of a grind. And again, the secondaries were one of the main selling points of the Siegfried. That's just the Siegfried. The Shikishima, too, is another 6-gun armed ship. This time with 6 20-inch guns instead of course, the 18-inch guns that the Yamato has. So, bigger guns, more accurate guns, and she had Harugumo turrets. Well, she has Harugumo turrets going up and down her side, which is quite good. These are the 100mm guns that can base pin 30mm of armor, which is pretty good for a tier 10 battleship to be able to have secondaries to pin that without taking IFHE. Not to mention, too, this is back before the new secondary skills were a thing. So secondaries, when you would build into them and you would take the manual file for secondary skill, they would instantly get the boost to their accuracy rather than it being built up over time. And the secondaries on the Shikishima were crazily accurate. Some very nice DD repellent that I've gotten, I believe, 2 Death Strike medals with just the secondaries on the Shikishima because some DD thought they could rush me, but they quickly found out they could not. So, yeah. And again, if you build into them, they had decent range. I think they also got out to 11.5 kilometers as well. Or, yeah, no, they didn't get out to 12. It was 11.5. So, again, on a 6-gun ship where you have, you know, a situation where if you miss one shell, that hurts quite a bit. You're able to play this ship at mid to close range if you want to, have your secondaries going off to help you deal with the ships in your range, and it was fun. It was really fun. The best part about these 2 ships too is that you could play them either as a mid to close range ship, and imagine that, an actual good mid to close range Japanese battleship. This is before we had, of course, like the Dyson and the Iwami and all that, and it was a Yami hull. So it was great. It was fun. But you could also build into their main battery guns and play them at longer ranges if you wanted to. Shikishima, of course, you know, accurate 20-inch guns, especially when you build into it. That's going to put quite a whooping on players. The Siegfried, accurate 15-inch guns from a cruiser platform, that's going to put a whooping on players too. So you had the option of building them for a mid to close range brawler or a long range sniper if you wanted to. But then the Commander rework came out. Siegfried completely lost the ability to build into her secondaries, like we've mentioned already. You might be thinking the Shikishima. Well, I mean, you can still build into the secondaries in the Shikishima, right? Yeah, you can, but they suck now. Why? Because when the Commander rework came out, they gave secondaries an absolutely massive bonk with a nerf bat to their base accuracy. The American secondary guns, if you guys remember back from like the Ohio and Massachusetts before the Commander rework, they had laser accuracy and they would melt any DD that dare came within the secondary range. The current secondary accuracy that we have on the American secondaries today is the secondaries post-nerf. So it was that big of a nerf. If you look at the secondaries of the American battleships today and compare them to what they were beforehand, it's day and night difference, even when you have the accuracy built up all the way. The German secondaries were horrendously bad, but they gave them a buff to their base accuracy to where they're more on par with the American secondaries after the Commander rework. Before the rework, it was terrible. There's a couple of older videos on my channel of me testing this out in the PT server before the rework came out, and it was not looking good at all. The Americans were actually outperforming the Germans simply because their shells could actually hit the target. The Germans could hit and pin the target because of the 128s and the German HE pin ratios, but they weren't hitting the targets at all, even with a max build. The Shikishima never got this buff, nor did any of the other secondary ships that we had beforehand. They didn't get that buff. So the Shikishima secondaries, even if you build into them, they just like drench the target in water with the amount of hits that they get. So yeah, even with the secondaries being built up to their maximum accuracy, it just isn't good. Because what made them great is that they could pin 30mm of armor, but they could hit what they were aiming at quite well. So, again, when dealing with DDs, that's an excellent combination. You can pin 30 millimeters of armor, so you can pin, the entire DD, and they were quite accurate. Against other ships, like battleships and cruisers and stuff, well, cruisers too, 30 millimeters of pin, that'll get you dealing with pretty much any cruiser you come across. But with battleships, they were accurate enough to where they would constantly be hitting the superstructure and doing a decent amount of damage. And of course, today, if they were accurate, battle cruisers are everywhere, so they'd have no problem pinning the extremities of battle cruisers. And keep in mind, the Shikishima, that's a steel ship. Someone like myself that does ranked, normally buys through the dockyards because I want to get the ship to review for the channel. Then I go back through and I get the still from that. I do clan battles as much as I can. Someone like me who's a fairly active player in this game, it takes me a year to get enough steel to get a still ship usually. Unless they pump out a couple extra dockyards in the year. A year. And that's me. Now, of course, there's veteran players that are in some of the more competitive, hyper-competitive clans that, of course, they got more still than what they know what to do with. But I'm not indicative of the average Joe. The average Joe typically takes forever to get enough steel in order to get a still ship. And they changed this overnight. And again, just like the Siegfried, they said that she had other attributes or parameters or properties that keep her performance up. Translation, you have to play as a sniper now. You can't build it for secondaries anymore. So these are two ships that were quite cost and time. Oh man, it just pains me to think about the amount of time that players have had to put in to get these ships. They're not ships that you can easily just pick up. And don't get me wrong, if something that you buy, like even a normal premium ship, had this amount of changes done to it, it sucks too, and they should be compensated for that in either other attributes or it should be corrected. But off the top of my head, and I was trying to think of any ships that this has happened to before I sat down to record this video. I can't think of any other premiums that have seen this much of a change in their play style as these two have. Of course, there's ships that have been nerfed and buffed quite a bit. Again, like the Stalingrad, survivability, can't build into it, so it just kind of burns now. And the other large cruisers too suffered quite a bit, but you can still play them the same. You guys get what I'm saying? Like they still have the guns, they still have the maneuverability that they have. I guess you could say the Henry with the Henry IV. But they've kind of circled back around and corrected that because they removed her great acceleration, deacceleration, but then they went back and they restored it pretty much. I think it's like 75% of what it used to be now at this point. But yeah, and think of it as like this situation that you buy a car because it has a certain feature that you like. All right, like let's say it's got heated seats. Okay, you bought the car because it's a nice car, has all these features on it, including the heated seats. But then one day, the car company goes, yeah, man, we're taking your heated seats now. But don't worry, the car still has other attributes that make up for it. Can you imagine if a car company tried to do that in real... Oh, wait. But you guys get what I'm saying? Like, yes, the ship is still there. Yes, they still perform well. But that's not why a lot of players bought these ships or grinded out these ships. They bought them because they were fun brawlers with great secondaries. And again, these ships are very time and resource consuming, or monetarily consuming in order to get. Because if you want to pay through 6 lines to get the Siegfried, it costs you $350. You want to know how I know that? Because I did it with the ad revenue from the channel in order to review the Siegfried the day after she came out. So yeah, just changed like that. And 2.5 years later, nothing. The Siegfried players did get a bit of a jab in the eyes because they released the Schroeder, which is a secondary focused German cruiser, in the dockyard of all places. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents on that. That's my I guess yearly soapbox on the Siegfried and the Shikishima situation. They need to be fixed wargaming. It's the right thing to do. You need to do it. It's long overdue, and yeah. It's still there's a secondary Shikishima sized hole in my heart still to this day. So guys, let me know what you guys think on this in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 50,000 subs, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. Hope you guys have a great Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week. If you don't hear from me before then, hope to catch you guys in the next one.